Before diving into today's story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more gripping tales. The late afternoon light spilled into Evan Hart's minimalist office, casting angular shadows over the polished concrete floors and award-lined walls. At 42, Evan stood tall, 6'2", with the posture of someone who embraced early mornings and discipline. His cool, steel gray eyes stayed locked on his wife, Tessa, as she paced across the room. Her movements were deliberate, almost theatrical, like she'd practiced this confrontation in front of a mirror. "Are you seriously not going to say anything?" she snapped, her voice cutting through the stillness. She had expected shouting, maybe a breakdown, but Evan's impassive expression threw her off. "Depends," he replied evenly. "Are we talking about your affair with Caleb, or the part where you tried to steal my architectural designs?" Tessa faltered, just for a second, before brushing it off with a smirk. "So, you do know," she said with venomous calm. "That should make this easier. Your brother, he's everything you're not. Bigger, more exciting, more of a man." Evan didn't flinch. He simply noticed the telltale tremor in her hand, the same one he'd spotted when they played poker 15 years ago. She always shook when she lied. "That all?" he asked, his tone still flat. "I'm leaving you, Evan," she barked. "For your twin brother. And all you've got is that all." She closed the distance between them, heels clicking like hammers on hardwood. "Caleb's offering me a stake in your family firm. We're moving to the beach house. You know, the one you could never afford because you were too ethical." Evan's mouth twitched slightly. "The house Caleb bought using stolen company funds?" he asked, voice edged with razor-sharp calm. "You're bluffing," she shot back. He let the silence linger long enough for her confidence to shrink. "And the sapphire ring he gave you last month, the one you thought I hadn't noticed? I paid for that with the bonus he siphoned off my contract." Tessa shielded her left hand instinctively. "My parents know about us," she hissed. "They've given their blessing. They always knew Caleb was the real heir to Hart Engineering. They just didn't say it out loud." Evan turned his attention back to his computer. "If you're done, the door's behind you. I have deadlines." "You and your bridges," she mocked. "Even Caleb says your earthquake-resistant design is flawed. You're a joke, Evan. A workaholic failure who couldn't even keep his wife satisfied." Evan's fingers clicked over his keyboard. "Close the door on your way out." Tessa hesitated, her perfectly curated meltdown unraveling. Then she stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to shake the plaques on the wall. Evan didn't move. He waited until the sound of her car faded into the distance. Then he opened his encrypted inbox and sent a draft he had written weeks ago to a contact in the FBI's white-collar division. That evening, Evan sat in his study, sipping a single malt that remained untouched as he reviewed months of silent footage from his security system. Infrared cameras documented everything with clinical precision. February 14th, Caleb and Tessa entered his home office at 2:03 a.m. with a key he never authorized. March 3rd, Caleb snapped photos of confidential files while Tessa played lookout. April 17th, Caleb installed malicious software while Evan was on a call with a crisis manufacturing issue staged by Tessa. What everyone dismissed as paranoia was actually preparation. He had noticed the patterns months ago. Tessa's yoga retreats. Caleb's sudden interest in seismic load-bearing innovations. The times Evan's files were mysteriously altered after work trips. They weren't just sleeping together. They were actively trying to steal his most valuable design, one that could revolutionize civil engineering in quake zones. A soft knock broke his focus. "Come in." Vivian Taylor entered, his legal counsel and a friend for over 2 decades. But tonight, her stiff posture and tightly clutched handbag gave her away. "There's something I need to confess," she said, voice taut. Evan didn't stand. He simply swiveled his monitor. "You helped Caleb create a shell company and try to transfer my patents to it," he said flatly. "I've known for months. I just wanted to see how far you'd go." Vivian's face went pale. I thought Caleb had your parents' backing. He showed me documents." "Forged documents," Evan replied, his voice controlled. "Save your apologies. Expect a call from the Bar Association by morning." "You can't do this," she whispered, panic blooming in her eyes. "We're friends." Evan looked her dead in the eye. "That's what makes it especially unethical. And legally damning." He returned to his screen. "Close the door on your way out." She fled. Evan watched her departure on the hallway cam. Then he opened a secure chat app and typed, "Initiate Phase 2. The reply came instantly. "FBI team standing by. Operation begins at 0900. For now." Evan turned back to the footage. There was still betrayal to catalog. The following morning, the Hart Engineering Group's downtown skyscraper glinted in the morning sun, its steel and glass exterior reflecting a city that still believed in integrity and legacy. Inside, Evan Hart stepped into the executive boardroom 10 minutes early. His charcoal suit was tailored to precision, his movements calm, deliberate. He looked every bit the man in control of his destiny. The boardroom quieted the moment he entered. At the head of the table sat Robert and Eleanor Hart, his parents, flanked by Caleb, whose smug posture couldn't mask the flicker of surprise at Evan's presence. They hadn't expected him to show. They had hoped he'd spiral. Robert attempted a warm tone. "Son, we thought, given the situation with Tessa, you'd take time to process." Evan set his briefcase down softly. "Before we address my personal life, let's discuss something that affects the company, like the unauthorized use of my bridge design, the attempted theft of proprietary intellectual property, and the shell corporation your other son created to sell it to foreign firms." The silence snapped like a brittle cable. Caleb stood, red creeping into his cheeks. "You're delusional," he barked. "Mother, father, he's obviously having a mental breakdown. This is what I warned you about." Evan merely pulled a thick folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. "Interesting response," he said calmly. "Most innocent people don't leap to deny accusations before asking for proof." Vivian, sitting stiffly a few seats away, attempted to interject. "This all seems like a misunderstanding. Caleb has only ever expressed concern for your well-being." Evan cut her off. "The FBI doesn't think it's a misunderstanding. In fact, they're quite fond of evidence. They should be arriving right about." The double doors opened. 2 men in dark suits entered, followed by 3 agents in official jackets. "I'm Special Agent Nelson," one announced, holding up a warrant. "We have authorization to arrest Mr. Caleb Hart on suspicion of wire fraud, corporate espionage, and misappropriation of intellectual property." Caleb backed away from the table. "You're kidding. Dad, do you owe something?" Robert stood, face flushed with anger. "Evan, this is madness. He's your brother." Evan stared at his father without blinking. "Was my brother. Now he's just a thief in a suit." The agents stepped forward, cuffing Caleb as Eleanor pleaded with her eyes. "Please, sweetheart. He's your twin." Evan's voice was ice. "He's a liability, and he's been dealt with." As Caleb was dragged from the room, screaming about setups and conspiracies, Evan remained composed. "One more thing," he said, adjusting his tie. "I've called an emergency board session for noon. We'll be discussing the removal of any officers implicated in federal investigations." Without waiting for a response, he walked out, leaving behind stunned silence and the sound of agents unpacking forensic equipment. His phone buzzed. Unsurprisingly, it was Tessa. He silenced the call without looking. He had no time for theatrics. The reckoning had only begun. The arrest of Caleb Hart spread through Hart Engineering Group like wildfire. Office chatter dropped to whispers. Smartphones buzzed with texts and news alerts. Employees peeked around corners and lingered near elevators, hoping to catch glimpses of federal agents escorting out boxes of seized documents. From a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows, Dean Langley watched it all unfold. At 55, he had spent over 2 decades managing large-scale infrastructure projects for the company, and he had grown bitter watching Evan Hart's meteoric rise. The chaos surrounding Caleb's arrest wasn't a crisis for Dean. It was a golden opportunity. His phone rang. "Tessa," he greeted with a satisfied smirk. "Tell me you have something useful," she snapped, her voice tight with desperation barely disguised beneath her usual venom. Dean chuckled. "Better. I've got documentation of Evan making critical miscalculations, enough to make him look unstable to the board." "Are you absolutely sure?" she asked. "We need this to work. Caleb's lawyers are flailing, and Evan just ambushed my entire plan. His parents are in shock." "I'm sure," Dean replied, clicking open a file labeled HartEdits.pdf. "I've been revising his project files for months. Tomorrow morning, I'll present everything. The board will have no choice but to force him out." Tessa's smile was almost audible. "Perfect. Caleb always said Evan was brilliant but paranoid. Now we can make that his downfall. Once we show the board he's a liability, the feds will start seeing him as the unhinged whistleblower instead of the victim. And someone has to restore order in the company," Dean added smugly. "Someone stable. Like me." "Caleb will be grateful," Tessa purred, "once this misunderstanding is cleared up." They ended the call. Across the city, Evan sat in his secure home office, watching it all unfold in real time. His hidden surveillance feed showed Dean's smug face as he ended the call with Tessa. Every word, every smug smirk, captured, stored, and time-stamped. A soft knock tapped at the door. "Enter," Evan said without turning around. Lila Park stepped in, his executive assistant of 8 years, her posture poised but alert. The PR team is asking how to respond to the media. Also, Mr. Langley scheduled a board meeting for tomorrow morning. Emergency agenda. Project safety and leadership stability. Evan turned toward her, his mouth curling into a small, knowing smile. What's his excuse? Rumors, Lila said carefully. Mental health, engineering miscalculations, standard smear campaign. His assistant mentioned he's been compiling evidence. I'm sure he has, Evan said, turning his monitor so she could see the footage. How long have you known Dean's been meeting with our competitors? Lila's eyes widened as she watched the surveillance feed. Dean shaking hands with executives in hotel lounges, slipping flash drives in exchange for envelopes. No wonder the C-Series projects kept falling behind, she muttered. Delayed deadlines mean more billable hours, Evans said. More hours, more kickbacks. And guess what? Dean has offshore accounts. Should I cancel the board meeting? No, Evans said calmly. Let Dean shine. Just make sure every board member receives this folder of evidence, exactly 10 minutes after he starts presenting. Lila nodded. And the press statement? No comment. Ongoing investigation. You know the drill. She paused at the door. And thank you for trusting me. Evan's voice softened. Thank you for never accepting Caleb's bribes. He tried, didn't he? 3 times, she said, chin raised. I recorded every one. As Lila exited, Evan returned to his feeds. Across town, Tessa was putting on a show at an upscale bistro, weeping theatrically about Evan's mental deterioration to anyone who'd listen. Meanwhile, in a prison holding room, Caleb clutched at his orange jumpsuit and muttered excuses to their stunned parents. You don't understand, Caleb insisted. Evan's unstable. I had to protect the company. We'll fix this, Eleanor Hart whispered, clinging to denial. Your father's calling in favors. Back in his study, Evan checked the clock. In 12 hours, Dean Langley would present doctored evidence. In 13, Dean Langley would be escorted away in handcuffs. Evan Hart wasn't done. He was just getting started. The next morning, the boardroom of Hart Engineering Group was packed. Tension hung in the air like static before a storm. Executives shifted in their chairs, whispering theories and rumors. Dean Langley stood at the head of the table, setting up his laptop with theatrical precision. His expression was solemn, but beneath it pulsed a smug anticipation. This was his moment. At the far end of the room, Evan Hart sat motionless. His face betrayed nothing. He hadn't spoken a word since taking his seat. Tessa, dressed to the nines but with puffy eyes and forced poise, sat closer to the front. She scanned the room anxiously, her designer purse clutched like a lifeline. Dean began, voice deep and grim. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish we weren't here for this. But what I'm about to share concerns the very safety of our company and the clients who trust us. He clicked to the first slide. On the screen, a series of complex structural calculations appeared, sections highlighted in red. These errors come directly from Mr. Evan Hart's latest earthquake-resistant bridge model, Dean explained. Stress load miscalculations, material failure predictions ignored. These are not minor oversights. They could cause catastrophic failure. Board members leaned forward, brows furrowed, concern creeping across their faces. And this isn't a one-time slip, Dean continued, shifting to another slide. Over the last year, Mr. Hart's designs have shown a pattern of decline. Combine this with his recent erratic behavior, calling in federal investigations against family, it raises serious concerns. Evan finally spoke, his voice calm but cutting. Mr. Langley, could you explain why that document you're displaying shows a timestamp of 11:47 p.m. last night? Dean's face tightened. I was formatting it. Evan nodded toward the back. Lila stepped forward, distributing thick folders to every board member. You may want to pause your concerns, Evan said smoothly, and review the materials in front of you. The room fell silent as paper rustled and eyes scanned page after page. It only took seconds before expressions shifted from confusion to shock to outright horror. Bank statements, emails arranging kickbacks, photographs of Dean meeting rival firm executives, metadata proving the project files had been tampered with. The chairman looked up from his folder. Mr. Langley, Would you care to explain these transfers and communications? Dean's face drained of all color. This is slander. Evan fabricated. I fabricated nothing, Evan cut in. And the FBI's Financial Crimes Division has had this evidence for weeks. In fact, they're quite punctual. As if on cue, the doors opened again. Special Agent Nelson walked in with two other federal officers. Dean Langley, he announced, holding up his badge. You're under arrest for corporate fraud, bribery, and obstruction of justice. Dean stumbled backward. This is a setup. Tessa, say something. But Tessa was already slinking toward the exit, her face a mixture of panic and disbelief. Mrs. Bowen, one agent called after her. We'll need to speak with you shortly. Please remain available. As the agents cuffed Dean and led him from the room, his wild protests echoed through the hall, just like Caleb's had the day before. Evan stood slowly and adjusted his tie. Well, he said to the stunned board, now that the distractions are gone, shall we get back to the actual data? You'll find that my original calculations are flawless and independently verified. No one objected. They were too busy grappling with the scale of what had just been exposed and who had orchestrated it. The chaos following Dean Langley's arrest hadn't yet settled when Evan returned to his office. The skyline of the city stretched beyond his floor-to-ceiling windows, but his focus remained on the digital files before him. The boardroom takedown had gone precisely as planned, every document timed, every accusation backed by unshakable proof. Still, there was more work to do. Lila stepped into the office carrying a tablet, her heels quiet on the polished floors. Dean's arrest made the front page of every industry publication this morning, she said. And 3 other project managers are being implicated. The FBI is expanding the investigation. Evan looked up. Good. What else? Your parents, she began cautiously. They're scrambling. I found this. She handed him the tablet. On the screen were internal company records, digital contracts from 5 years ago. They transferred 15% of the company to Caleb behind your back, she said. No board disclosure. And the tax filings don't match up. I cross-referenced them. They've been hiding assets and underreporting for nearly a decade. Evan's face didn't change. He simply forwarded the files to his secure government contact. The IRS will want to see this. Do you want to meet with your parents? Lila asked, almost reluctantly. No need. Evan replied, turning back to his desk. They'll be occupied. Lila hesitated. There's something else. He looked up again. Tessa. She's been calling nonstop. She says she has new information about Caleb. Evan didn't blink. Forward all contact to the FBI's tip line. Lila gave a small nod. Understood. As she left, Evan opened his secure inbox. There, a message waited. Second round of arrests scheduled for tomorrow. Surveillance confirms all targets. Proceed. He typed one word. Proceed. Later that night, his home security system pinged. On one of the many feeds, 2 figures approached the side entrance. Caleb, out on bail, and Tessa, desperate, disheveled, driven by panic. Evan didn't move. He let the camera record. Inside the house, they slipped into his office using a key Tessa had hidden years ago. They tore through drawers, flipped folders, opened the safe. Where are the designs? Tessa hissed. Caleb, frantic, began shredding whatever he could grab. If we destroy the originals before the FBI finishes the audit, we can claim he fabricated the whole thing. Say he's mentally unstable. They didn't notice when the room lights switched to bright white, or when the office door sealed with an electronic lock. Police. Hands in the air. On the feed, Evan watched silently as both were arrested, their expressions morphing from confusion to horror. They had destroyed nothing important. Every document they touched was a decoy. The real evidence had been protected months ago. Archived. Backed up. Shared with federal prosecutors. His phone rang. It was the police sergeant. Mr. Hart, we've detained 2 intruders. Press charges. Absolutely, Evan said calmly. The FBI will want everything. He hung up, then leaned back in his chair. They'd tried to bury him with betrayal. Instead, they had buried themselves. The next morning, the entrance to the federal courthouse buzzed with media chaos. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and microphones jutted forward like weapons. Caleb Hart, once the golden son of Hart Engineering, now shuffled in chains, his designer image replaced by prison orange and unshaven regret. Inside, behind one-way glass, Special Agent Nelson stood with Evan, watching the interrogation begin. Your brother's been very busy, Nelson muttered, flipping through a thick case file. So far, we've traced over $12 million in misappropriated funds. The beach house? Fully financed through embezzlement and laundered via shell companies. Evan didn't respond immediately. His eyes were on Caleb, who sat nervously across from the investigators, cuffed hands tapping an unsteady rhythm against the table. How long? Evan finally asked. Nelson sighed. Espionage, fraud, conspiracy. We're looking at a minimum of 10 years. That's before we finish the deeper dive into offshore accounts. Evan's jaw tightened just slightly. He's already offering cooperation, Nelson added. Wants to testify against your parents in exchange for a reduced sentence. Of course he does, Evan said. His voice was cold. Always trying to save himself. Never mind the destruction he caused. In the interview room, Caleb's newest lawyer entered, his third since the arrest, holding a thick folder of plea agreements. Caleb's eyes lit up, but the light didn't last. The FBI began laying out the evidence. Bank transfers, forged documents, surveillance footage, timestamps. Piece by piece, they dismantled his defenses. Nelson gave a dry chuckle. Your brother's crying. Evan turned away. Send me the transcript when you're done. He had another meeting. Across town, Tessa paced the marble lobby of her divorce lawyer's office. Her once flawless appearance was unraveling. Designer clothes from last season, cracked heels, smeared mascara. She slammed a stack of papers on the attorney's desk. This is robbery, she hissed. He's leaving me with nothing after 15 years. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, leaned back in her chair. Ms. Bowen. Tessa, she corrected bitterly. I've gone back to my maiden name. Regardless, the lawyer said, given your involvement in the crimes, and the infidelity clearly outlined in the prenup, you're fortunate Mr. Hart isn't pursuing criminal charges. Tessa laughed, dry and desperate. Caleb's in jail. His assets are frozen. And I'm lucky. You had an affair with your husband's twin and helped him steal a design worth millions. You voided all rights to marital property under the terms you signed. If you don't accept this settlement, litigation will begin, and Mr. Hart has enough evidence to ensure criminal prosecution. Tessa's bravado faltered. She sank into the leather chair, staring blankly at the offer on the table. I didn't think he'd ever fight back, she said, voice small. He was always so calm, so focused on work. I never thought he'd plan everything down to the last detail. The lawyer offered. That's why you're sitting here. You don't understand, Tessa whispered. I need to talk to him. I know things that could change this. He's made it clear, the lawyer said, standing. All contact goes through official counsel. Now will you sign? Tessa reached for the pen with shaking fingers. Rain tapped the window beside her. Outside, the storm she had started was just beginning to turn inward. Meanwhile, back at Hart Engineering's headquarters, Evan stood alone at the window, watching the city below as lightning forked across the skyline. Behind him, Lila placed a fresh stack of reports on his desk. The boards approved the full leadership transition, she said. They're eager to restore public trust, especially with your parents facing federal tax evasion charges. And the bridge project? Fully verified, she confirmed. Construction starts next month. And Tessa came by the office. Said you don't understand. Security escorted her out. Send the footage to her attorney, Evan said without looking. We'll need it for the restraining order. Lila hesitated. Your parents called. The IRS froze their assets. They're asking for help. Evan finally turned. They didn't want my help when they were secretly giving Caleb control. Now they can deal with the consequences. Should I respond? No, he said simply, returning to his files. Let them experience what accountability feels like. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Hart, the FBI team is here for your final statement. Evan straightened his jacket. Send them in. Agent Nelson entered again, carrying the final paperwork. 10 years minimum, he said, placing the documents on the desk. Caleb pled out. Full restitution. No trial. Evan signed without hesitation. Nelson paused. I've worked in financial crimes a long time. Never seen someone document betrayal this precisely. You knew this was coming, didn't you? Evan's voice was a scalpel. I believe in preparation. The storm outside had started to clear. Inside, the foundations were only getting stronger. 1 year later, Evan Hart stood beneath a brilliant blue sky at the foot of his greatest achievement. The bridge, his bridge, gleamed in the sunlight, a marvel of modern engineering. Designed to withstand powerful earthquakes, it was already being studied by universities around the world. Dignitaries and reporters surrounded him, cameras flashing, microphones extended. Mr. Hart, a reporter called. How does it feel to see your vision realized? Evan's eyes never left the structure. "It feels like justice," he said simply. Ribbon cuttings followed. Applause. Speeches. Yet no one mentioned Caleb. No one uttered the name of the man now serving a 10-year sentence in federal prison. No one spoke of Tessa, whose disgrace had driven her across the country. His parents, silent ghosts of a crumbled empire, were absent too, living in quiet shame after the IRS had dismantled their finances. And Vivian? Disbarred and forgotten. Evan had built a bridge for the world. But for his enemies, he had built something else, a monument to ruin. The celebration faded into evening. That night, Evan stood at his penthouse office window overlooking the city. The Hart Engineering Group now occupied 3 continents. His earthquake-resistant designs had revolutionized the field, and his reputation, once quietly respected, had become legend. 5 years had passed since the betrayal. Lila Park entered the room with a digital report. Caleb's 3rd appeal was denied, she said without ceremony. He has 5 years left, assuming good behavior, which, according to his prison records, isn't likely. Evan's reflection in the glass smirked faintly. He still has a cellmate feeding us updates? Yes, and he spends most of his time in the library. He's writing letters to publishers, claiming he was framed. No one's responded. She paused. Tessa's in Phoenix, working real estate. Her 3rd comeback failed. Someone keeps tipping off clients about her past. Evan's voice didn't change. She tried dating again? Some tech executive. But our anonymous message about her criminal background ended it quickly. She signed a settlement barring her from interviews or books. Let's ensure that clause remains enforced. Already done, Lila confirmed. She drives a 10-year-old Ford now. Lives in a 1-bedroom apartment. And my parents? In that condo in Florida, she said. Your father tried consulting again. No one would hire him. Tax evaders don't inspire trust. My mother? She's been kicked out of 3 social clubs. Keeps defending Caleb. It's not going well. And Vivian? Paralegal in Nebraska, Lila said. Tried to get reinstated last year. The ethics committee received an anonymous package. Let me guess, Evan said, turning from the window. They denied the application. He nodded. And the company? Stock's up 300%. You've secured 3 international contracts this quarter. Engineering Monthly named you Structural Engineer of the Century. Evan's eyes flicked to the plans on his desk, designs for a new coastal infrastructure initiative. Oh, and, Lila added, we bought Caleb's beach house at auction. For pennies. Demolition. Scheduled next week. We'll film it. The land will become a public park, named after your bridge. Evan allowed himself a rare, tight smile. And send the footage to Caleb's prison inbox. Lila chuckled. Already cued. She hesitated before leaving. One more thing. The industry gala is tonight. Lifetime Achievement Award. Several board members suggested you mention reconciliation. Forgiveness. Evan's expression didn't change. Interesting advice, he said. For men who kept their jobs by proving they knew nothing. Lila's phone buzzed. Update from Phoenix. Tessa's trying to revise the divorce terms. She says she's changed. Evan gave a dry laugh. Still thinks emotion is a weapon. She also sent a note. Said she misses you. Forward it to her therapist, the one she's been lying to. Already done. One more thing, she added, pulling up a new file. The junior engineer you promoted last month? He's been leaking data to a rival firm. Handled, Evans said. Evidence is with their board. He'll be fired today. Publicly. For ethical violations. Same game Caleb played, Lila muttered. That's why we now include a case study on loyalty in employee training, Evans said. Mine. The whispered version? She asked. Evan nodded. The one that matters. The elevator pinged. The car was waiting downstairs. Keynotes on trust, Lila said with a smirk. Fitting. Approve the industry journal's request for a profile, Evan added. Include a line about Caleb's location. With bars on the windows? Exactly. The elevator descended. Somewhere in a prison cell, a small apartment, and a Florida condo, his betrayers faced another day of humiliation. Meanwhile, Evan was headed to another spotlight, another award. His plan had worked. Perfectly. The lobby doors parted, and Evan Hart stepped out into the night air, escorted by the gentle hum of city lights and the flash of cameras awaiting his arrival. The gala hall glowed with prestige. Industry leaders, university heads, and global partners had gathered to honor the man who had not only revolutionized earthquake-resistant architecture, but had rewritten the rules of strategic survival. As Evan crossed the carpet, Reporters clamored with questions, but none about Caleb. Not about Tessa. Not about scandal. Those chapters had faded from public narrative, replaced by accolades, case studies, and headlines that read, "The quiet architect of a new era." Inside, applause echoed as he ascended the stage. Lila sat near the front, her phone on silent, but notifications continued to stream in. From the stage, Evan delivered his keynote. "Foundations," he began, "are not just concrete and steel. They are choices, integrity, preparation. They are the quiet decisions made when no one is watching." The audience leaned in. They expected brilliance. What they heard was a warning wrapped in wisdom. Trust is earned. Once broken, it cannot be rebuilt with words. It must be rebuilt with action or razed entirely. He didn't mention his past. He didn't have to. Everyone already knew. Meanwhile, far from the celebration, in a prison cell, Caleb stared at a flickering screen as a demolition video played. His former beach house crumbled under the weight of an excavator's claw. On screen, a plaque was unveiled, Hart Memorial Park, in honor of resilient design. He screamed. No one listened. In Phoenix, Tessa watched the gala on social media from the small kitchen of her apartment. Her latest job application had been rejected that morning. She had Googled herself, again. The first result? Corporate traitor, the woman who betrayed the wrong man. Tears welled up, but not from guilt. From the realization that Evan had made sure her reputation was not just broken, but unsalvageable. She had texted him again. No reply. He never replied. In Florida, Robert and Eleanor Hart sat in silence. Their television displayed the ceremony. Their son, the one they had overlooked, shaking hands with diplomats, accepting awards, getting standing ovations. The phone rang. They didn't answer. It wasn't Evan. He hadn't called in over a year. They knew he never would. In Nebraska, Vivian flipped through court files at her paralegal desk. Her hands paused on a cover story about the bridge opening. She hadn't been invited. She hadn't expected to be. The package she received last year, anonymous, precise, devastating, had ensured her name would never sit beside the words licensed attorney again. She tried to forget, but Evan Hart had a memory like bedrock, solid, immovable, eternal. Back at the gala, Evan descended the stage as a standing ovation thundered, but his smile was faint, controlled, calculated. In the back of the hall, one of the new interns asked Lila quietly, "Is it true what they say about Mr. Hart?" She arched a brow. "What do they say?" "That he took down everyone who betrayed him and never raised his voice once." Lila turned to look at Evan, now surrounded by admirers, his expression serene. "They're wrong," she said. "He didn't just take them down. He built something better from the rubble." The moral? Never underestimate the quiet one, especially not the man who plans, waits, and never forgets. Evan Hart didn't just survive betrayal. He engineered its downfall. And then, he made the world walk across it, one perfectly calculated step at a time.